Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chill Times with David and Adrian. Say hi, Adrian.
Hello.
Very good, Adrian. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Scott Pilgrim versus the World and sort of its approach to gender stereotypes, right?
Yes, sir.
If you're in need of a summary, I've got a fancy little one prepared right here. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World follows Scott Pilgrim, a young adult from Toronto, that plays as a bass guitarist in his friend's band. After a nasty breakup, Scott's lonely drifting is stopped by Ramona Flowers, a girl from New York who he falls in love with. However, in order to date her, he has to fight and defeat her 7 evil exes that come down to beat up our hero. So, I'm a big fan of Scott Pilgrim, gonna be real with you. I've seen the movie like 6 times and I read all the graphic novels. Adrian, this is like your second time seeing it, right?
Yeah, I've only ever seen it 2 times, but it's a really enjoyable film.
Yeah, I'd say that Scott Pilgrim is slowly well, it already is, but it's a big cult classic. And I was looking at this film, and I was looking at the way that it analyzes gender roles. I thought it was interesting the way that Scott Pilgrim is sort of like this skinny dude. He's basically Michael Cera, right? But he beats up like these 7 dudes, and all of them were sort of these Chad guys that embody, masculine heroes that we're all used to seeing. Yeah, in this case,
He's
they're
like,
villains.
like you got Chris Evans' character, you got Todd the Vegan, a lot of them going up against Michael
Yeah.
Cera. So it's very kind of different how normal Hollywoodish movies do, like the protagonist as a very macho kind of stereotypically masculine guy.
Yeah, and I'll also say that I noticed that even the female characters are more masculine than our hero Scott. And I don't know, I feel like in our world, toxic masculinity is a very often talked about topic. We talk about it all the time. We're going to talk about how Scott can kind of combat that, or how this film
movie
is a big breakaway
portrays-
from that. Yeah. So let's come in here. I've done a little bit of research. I've got some quotes and stuff. We're gonna first talk a little bit about how Scott Pilgrim doesn't adhere to the stereotypical male hero roles. So I found this source from the Journal of Popular Film and Television, written by Drew Todd. And he makes a point of saying that, in classic Hollywood, the heroes and masculine people were always gritty, tough, grapefruit in the face type guys, and how some of the heroes instead were also like charming and sophisticated, kind of like James Bond-ish, I'll have an exact quote for the study up on screen for you guys to see. That's kind of the way that Hollywood's laid out how our male heroes should act, and it sort of tells us the way that we should act, or that men should act. I say we because me and you are both men, but just in general, the way
Yeah.
men should act. We'll have a little talk about women too in the next
Yeah.
section here.
It kind of puts it like it like kind of constrains you how like you should be able to act, or how you should be able to like be heroic and stuff like that. Like gives you a very narrow pathway.
Yeah, when we see people on TV who are heroes, we always want to be the hero, right? So they kind of tell us the way that we should be if we want to be a hero. But Scott Pilgrim doesn't really adhere to these characters. He isn't like some muscle-bound beefy dude or a kung fu master, and he isn't James Bond wearing a suit talking all fancy and stuff. He like he's this skinny guy. He's soft-spoken. He's really unassuming. They played by Michael Cera, right?
Yeah, not like a very kind of like Chris Evans or anything.
Yeah, if you see Michael Cera in a bar, you could probably safely assume he couldn't beat your ass, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of wearing like a costume or like a fancy suit, designer clothes, or anything like that, he wears like this bulky parka and an ugly T-shirt, a stupid hat, and he's got like sneakers on, right?
Yeah, he's
not
not
yeah,
like the most intimidating protagonist.
he isn't intimidating at all, but none of that really stops him from beating up the bad guys and saving the day. Like there's a lot of fight scenes in this movie. 7 basically. Seven Evil X's,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
But yeah, Michael Cera is always a badass, even though he isn't meant to look like it. And also, his girlfriend Ramona Flowers, I'd say is more masculine, or more identifies with those masculine gender roles than Scott really does.
Yeah, I mean, she kind of takes control, I think, of the scene, except for like the last fight scene, whenever those two are in the room together. I
Yeah,
think like she always kind of seems like she like very calm, very kind of like more in control of like the situation up until like the fights, obviously. But like, yeah, she always
absolutely.
seems
Yeah, and Scott's more of like the emotional one. You know, he's the one that
like.
experiences the lows. You know, he's the one that gets sad and stuff. His sadness is sort of why the story began to begin with,
Mhm.
right? And I have a quote here. This is from a study from the University of Arkansas's. Quote on screen again, but I'm going to read this one out to you. And they say that women are portrayed as dependent on other characters. This is just in film in general. Women are portrayed as dependent on other characters, over emotional, and confined to low status jobs when compared to enterprising and ambitious male characters. Right? And I'd say that in this film, that's what that's what Scott isn't. Or you know, that describes Scott more than Ramona. Right?
Yeah, yeah, like the roles are more switched in this film for sure.
Scott's the emotional one. There's a fight scene with Ramona, and she whips out like this huge hammer, you know, and it's like, you know, we see it all the time. We see like the male hero pull out like a big gun or a huge sword or something like that, you know, and a lot of people sort of compare that to maybe overcompensation or some Freudian type, you know,
Yeah,
you know what I'm
something
talking
around
about.
that part.
There's a certain organ that Freud really likes to talk about. Anyway, but in this case, it's actually a woman wielding it, you know, and she
Yeah,
has like her bright dyed hair and stuff, and she's a very all that stuff about her says that she's a very take charge person, and that she's like the most important person in the room, you know, and she could kick anyone's ass, right? And I'd
yeah,
say that overall, she is much more of a badass than our sheepish hero Scott, right?
hmm yeah, for sure.
And let's see here. Okay. In media, we are constantly bombarded with heroes and characters that serve as role models that are also similar. We're going to be getting into toxic masculinity here. I have another quote for that. So this quote comes from University of Colorado, and they basically say that when people see, exact quote on screen again, when people see characters sympathetic or unsympathetic, basically meaning, you know, the people that you relate to and the people you don't relate to, protagonist, antagonist ish, that when they perform the same amount of toxic behaviors, they specifically say children, but I think for people in general, that people are learning that it's acceptable to behave in these ways, you know, in this toxic masculine manner, right?
Hmm.
I'm gonna say that Scott Pilgrim, you know, we're bringing it back again, but Scott Pilgrim is sort of the anti, you know, toxic masculinity here.
Yeah, the seven deadly X's definitely represent the more toxic
Yeah,
masculinity.
yeah. All the seven deadly X's are the antagonists, the people we're not supposed to like. But Scott Pilgrim is a very non-masculine guy who does very non-toxic things. He's our hero,
Hmm.
and you
Yeah.
know, I'm gonna get a little bit more specific here because I feel like we're being a little vague. Um, so the seven X's, you know, at least some of them. Mainly we're going to be talking about Chris Evans and Todd, the vegan. Chris Evans actually has a name in the movie. I just keep calling him Chris Evans because he's Chris Evans. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I don't know who Todd the vegan is, but Chris Evans is like this. He has a leather jacket and a skateboard, and he's ripped, dude. He's like this Chad of a guy, and he's very take charge, in your face kind of guy.
Yeah, like if you saw him in any other movie, he would be like the kind of traditional protagonist of that film.
Yeah, and it's like within 20 seconds of seeing Scott, he's beating the shit out of him, right? And that's a very toxic masculine thing to do, but he's trying to assert his dominance, you know, and he says like, the only thing keeping me away from her, or something like that, referring to Ramona, is like the 20
Yeah.
seconds it's going to take to kick your ass. And
Yeah,
that's a very toxically masculine behavior. I have to prove to woman that I am strong by punching another man.
yeah. And
Todd the
also
oh sorry.
another, it's all good. And like another aspect that kind of shows up in the movie is that Todd, or not Todd, Scott is a bit more like emotional, and the Seven Deadly Exes aren't really like emotion. At least from what I remember, they're all mostly just kind of fixated on just kicking the shit out of
Yeah,
Scott, basically.
yeah.
Like that's all they really care about.
I'd say that's pretty evident in Todd too, because he kind of always has like this straight dumb face. I mean, it's also because the character's stupid, but he doesn't really. You don't really see a moment of regret or pain or any sort of negative emotion in him until like he's pretty much beaten and he loses his magical vegan powers. If you don't know, Todd the vegan has magical vegan powers in Scott Pilgrim. It's a funny thing. But yeah, he doesn't really show any remorse or anything like that until that happens. And it's kind of like sort of a toxic masculine behavior that when you're strong and tough, you don't need to show emotion, because you're stronger and better than that, because that's the way men are supposed to be.
Yeah, it's like a sign of weakness to show emotion.
And I'm gonna say that we're gonna move on to the last X here I want to talk about is Gideon. He's the final X, and he's kind of this guy who's just as skinny and wiry and not very threatening really as Scott is, right? But he embodies toxic masculinity though, because he wears like the fancy suits and he has designer glasses and he talks really fancifully with big talk and he's always chewing gum. He's always trying to assert how much cooler he is than everybody and how much he doesn't care about the things going on in the world.
Like whereas Scott kind of became his own person. Sorry, what's the X's name again?
Gideon. Gideon's the bad guy.
Yeah, Gideon. Yeah, Gideon is going for more of a trying to like prove something almost, like because he doesn't, even though he doesn't really look like a typical kind of like how Chris Evans or Todd look, he's still trying to emulate that kind of like feeling of people. He's still trying to emulate that feeling from people, like when they see him.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you made a good point there that Scott's like his own person, and that's sort of the key point I wanted to say about how this film addresses masculinity. Scott Pilgrim is still a man, and he's a hero, and he saves the day and all that, but he does it in a way that's really different, or he acts in a way that's really different than the way Hollywood tells us that men should act, right? He's really his own person, He isn't trying to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. He isn't trying to be John McClane. He isn't trying to be James Bond. He's just Scott Pilgrim. He's doing his own thing, and he's trying to, fight for what he loves, and he's trying to defend himself from the X's, which mostly just attack him out of the blue. Right?
Yeah, and it's nice to have films like this where it shows that you don't have to be a very like emotionless, macho kind of to be like a man.
And I'm not gonna say there's anything wrong with enjoying like movies with these big masculine characters, right? Like I love Die Hard. I love James Bond. I love
John Wick. Those movies are fun.
John Wick's great. The Dark Knight,
Oh yeah.
But it's good that we have films like these that make an effort to have their characters be their own people and still be heroes. It tells us as an audience that we don't have to act the way that most heroes act to be a hero. We don't have to be these beefy dudes or secret agent guys to save the day. We can just be ourselves and we can still be heroes and cool and awesome and people will love us. Yeah. Anyway, we're a little bit over time here, so we're gonna cut it off here. But thank you for watching. Thank you for watching Chill Times with David and Adrian. I hope you had a chill time. And yeah, I'll see you later. Say bye, Adrian.